So we're back on Total War Warhammer 2 today in the heart of the mosquito swamps, and Big Daddy Rat Ogre Roger, the Bonebreaker, is ready to break some bones against the Vampire Counts of Sylvania. Now the Vampire Counts versus Skaven matchup is a very interesting one. I think both factions are quite good, but there is one thing in particular that I feel like defines the matchup, and that is the fact that the Vampire Counts have fear and terror all across their line. And when you think about the Skaven, what is the one thing that maybe characterizes them more than anything? Well, obviously there's the big scary contraptions they have, but on top of that, it's really bad leadership. They're swarming numbers. That's typically what you think about when you think about Skaven. They're going to have tons and tons of guys on the field, but they're not going to have very good leadership. They're going to rout a lot. They're going to have morale problems, and when everything on the other side of the field causes fear and causes terror, you have to do something about that. So what you'll often see with the Skaven in the Vampire Counts matchup is you'll see Stormvermin hit the field. That's because they are the tankiest, the most survivable, the highest leadership infantry unit for the Skaven, and they can hold the line against the hordes of zombies and skeletons that will be coming your way. So we have gone for a front line of Stormvermin with shields, and we have 2 chevrons on each to give them a little bit more leadership, a little bit more melee defense, because all I want them to do is survive against the hordes of Graveguard. They'll be able to get plenty of kills, maybe not deal a massive amount of damage, but they're very survivable, and they won't rout. You get 81 leadership on these guys. That's pretty nice. That's what we're going to want. Now, Rat Ogres are the other kind of themey part of this build here. Rat Ogres I really like in the Vampire Counts matchup as well. I like the unit in general. They don't have great leadership. I think they start base at like 56 or 57, so it's kind of low, but you can buff that up relatively easily, and more importantly, they have immune to psychology, which is going to make them, well, immune to fear and terror until their leadership drops below 50%. And they're large, and as we know with the Vampire Counts, there are a few things though the VCs struggle with, and large units is one of them. So having 4 or 3 of those on the field, anchored by that Big Daddy Bonebreaker with the Warlord, that'll be very nice. And we think about the Warlord for a second as we shift back over and look at him one more time, because I absolutely adore this model. It is by far one of the coolest mounts in the game. Warlord only costs 1600 gold, completely kitted out with the ground roll armor buff as well. So if he gets in a bad situation, he can pop that ground roll armor, get plus 60 of it. He doesn't have great armor to start with, but his stats overall are quite good, especially when you consider the fact that Frenzy is on top of all these stats you already see right here. Armor piercing, great mobility, scurry away, and he has that Verminous Valor, so he can get out of bad situations as well. So I actually really like the pick there. He's very cheap and can do a lot for you. For the Vampire Counts, we've got Mannfred von Carstein on top of a Hellsteed with Wind of Death, Raise Dead, Invocation of the Heck, and I think, is that Doom and Darkness? Let's take, I hate this, you can't, there we go. Doom and Darkness, yeah. We got minus 16 leadership, so that'll be pretty nice to kind of imbue some more of those morale penalties. We got the Mortis Engine. Remember, this thing is not ethereal. It can be a great pick against the Skaven, causes terror, bonus versus infantry, and AP. So a very nice centerpiece unit, but it is not ethereal, so it can get chunked down by range fire. You have to be careful about those Skaven slings and all the range hits they can field. We got some Graveguard as the main line. We got some Cryptors backing up some Skeleton Warriors, which are, it's a very nice pick. I mean, you see this all the time. It's been the meta for the Vampire account since the start of Total War Warhammer 1. You throw monstrous infantry behind some cheap chaff, and you can get some very nice damage done that way. We also have some Karn Race out on the flank, and some Black Knights, which will add some nice mobility. They can do a lot for you for only 600 gold. Crappy stats, but more than enough to do a lot of killing in the back lines, and most importantly, make sure that routing units don't come back to the field. That is what they can really offer you in this matchup. So I like the Black Knight pick as well. So interestingly, we're going to talk a little bit about Graveguard here before we get into the actual engagement. Graveguard are, of course, the most cost-effective infantry in the Vampire Counts main line. I like them in the Skaven matchup, but when you think about it, everything I've talked about so far, right? The fact that people are typically going to bring Stormvermin in this matchup because you want them to hold the line, because Plague Monks are going to be too cheap. They're going to lose to Graveguard. They're not survivable, right? So people go for Stormvermin. Graveguard aren't going to be able to deal with Stormvermin quite as easily, so it's interesting. Some players like to go for Graveguard with great weapons because they know the enemy is going to field a bunch of Stormvermin on the field. So I would have liked to see a few of those thrown in as well, maybe 3 Graveguard, 2 with great weapons, but that would be pretty solid. But yeah, he hasn't gone for that. He doesn't have a lot of AP on the front line. He'll rely on the Cryptors, the back charges from the Black Knights, and the spellcasting from Mr. Mannfred von Carstein. So let's get into the game. We've got some gutter runners up front here. Do a little bit of skirmishing with them early. Of course, they have those snare nets, so they can lower the speed of enemy cavalry that's chasing them down by 20%. It can be very nice. And, more importantly, perhaps this game, they can chunk down Mortis engines. So, I'm going to want to get that off the field very early. On the flip side, if you're playing the Vampire accounts, you want to make sure that that Mortis engine gets in the thick of the fighting, causes some of that AoE debuff, causes that terror, but you want to keep it moving, and you want to make sure it doesn't stick in combat for too long and get stuck, because that is when these gutter runners will be able to absolutely shred them with their shurikens. So a lot to think about there. Pretty interesting matchup. What we're going to do here is keep the Rat Ogres, just like the Crypt Horrors are being used on this side. We're going to keep the Rat Ogres in and amongst the Stormvermin with halberds and the Stormvermin with sword and shield. And we're going to just buff up our left flank and make sure that we don't get overwhelmed by the Crypt Horrors. But at the moment, I don't know about these Karn Race or the Black Knights. They are hidden. So, pretty nice positioning there from Achilles. On this flank, more halberds, more Rat Ogres. And we're going to be charging into melee very soon here. So, the engagement will begin in earnest. Skeleton Warriors up the right flank. Stormvermin charging in. Crypt Horrors will follow up closely behind. And we'll rely on the high leadership of our Stormvermin to hold the line here as the Bonebreaker gets in and starts breaking some bones against those big daddy skeletons. And with those Warstone Power Fists, it shouldn't be much of a problem. Look at those drills on the end of those fists, man. That's absolutely brutal. They're going to be able to tear through the skeletons pretty easily. We're going to pop Rally and make sure that all this stuff has that plus 16 leadership. That'll be very nice. Now, the Black Knights are coming in for their flanking charge. This is not really where Black Knights shine. They're not going to be able to do a lot of damage against armored targets. They are going to get a flanking charge. They are going to imbue some of that fear, but with the plus 16 leadership already popped on our Stormvermin, and these are halberds, they're not going to be able to do a massive amount of damage against the 90 armor of our Stormvermin. As nice as that move was, but there are Karn Race following in the background and more Black Knights who will probably go for my Gutter Runners. He does have sight of them. And Mannfred von Carstein will be looking for a big cast somewhere. Definitely raise dead in the back lines, get some zombies in the back. That'll probably be what he goes for. We have Stormvermin out on this flank killing some zombies and getting a really nice volley on Mannfred early on in the game, doing some early damage with those shurikens. And we are cycling our Rat Ogres all the way from the right flank over to the left to help reinforce against these Black Knights, because Rat Ogres will absolutely munch them for dinner. Mannfred took a ton of damage in that fight, but we have a Wind of Death going down here in the middle of the Stormvermin with sword and shield, and that is going to do some serious damage, carving a path of red ruin there. Very nice cast from Mannfred, and that was not overcast, so it could have obliterated the entire unit. But with that said, he got 20 kills, took those Stormvermin down to half strength, which is pretty nice. So it was a pretty nice cast. Not 100% sure it's worth that much mana for how much damage he did, but it looked cool. We got a decent amount of kills. I'm not going to complain if I was him. Now, Crypt Horrors definitely doing what they do best, getting into the melee. They only have 4 kills so far, but backing up the Stormvermin, or backing up the Skeletons rather, against the Stormvermin, they'll be able to do a lot of damage. Karn Race getting into the thick of the fighting, and these guys are not a unit you see a whole lot, but they're an interesting choice against the Skaven as well. They cause a ton of armor piercing, of course, and they are ethereal. Not a ton of magic damage on the Skaven main line. In fact, I don't have a whole lot to deal with them at all, so I kind of just have to commit infantry and hope I can wear them down over time, but that'll be the engagement the Karn Race want, and they're going to do a lot of work out on this flank, because I don't have anything really to counter them whatsoever. I do have a Plague Priest to summon some of these Clan Rats in the back lines, and I also have the Pestilens summon as well, so we can get more Plague Monks on the field to get some rear charges against the Grave Guard and Skeletons. But in the center, he is doing quite well. You can see the Wind of Death has done quite a number on my Stormvermin. Zombies, of course, melting, but Grave Guard should be able to do relatively well in that fight. Zombies are just going to wear me down, and I think fatigue is going to be one of the bigger issues for the Skaven right now. Leadership, not such a big deal because he's not rear charging. The fear, not going to do that much damage to, well, they have 55 leadership right now, kind of isolated on this flank, but not the biggest deal. But yeah, I think the fatigue is going to be the biggest issue because I have to cut through those zombies before I get into the actual meat of the infantry, which is Grave Guard itself. Of course, they don't actually have any meat in the bones, but whatever. So we're going to do some good skirmishing here with the Gutter Runners. Going to do a lot of damage to the Black Knights, who are pretty much completely getting wiped out over on that side. And here in the center, Rat Ogres are holding the line exceptionally well for me. And the Bonebreaker, up to 39 kills, just RKOing those Grave Guard out of nowhere. It's a beautiful thing. I love this mount. Like I said, it can do some serious work for you. And that plus 16 leadership is keeping everything in the fight for right now. So we're going to keep them in there. Just make sure that we can kill all these Crypt Horrors. These are not engaging for some reason, but I imagine they'll get under control relatively soon. There they go. Mannfred getting a charge into the flank of the Halberds. Doesn't want to stick around there for too long. Thankfully, my Gutter Runners are still alive, so I'm going to keep them for the late game, try to shut down this Mortis engine, which is already up to 30 kills and causing a lot of problems for me at the moment. Krator is thinking about a different engagement, going to protect the Mortis Engine, routing these Plague Monks that were summoned. And yeah, you can see the Plague Monks, only 1 kill so far. Already lost a decent amount of HP to their unbinding, and that is one of the most unique things about the Skaven. They're one of the only factions in Total War Warhammer that can actually deal with the numbers the vampire counts have with summons of their own. In fact, they can actually summon about as many as the vampire counts themselves, and you'll typically see vampires sometimes summon 14 zombies in the course of a game, or at least try to. They'll have 2 casters with those 7 zombie summons, and that can be really hard to keep up with in terms of numbers. Skaven can do that with their summons as well. Clan Rats and Plague Monks, super nice summons to just give you some more meat on that main line. What do we have going on right here? We have some more summons. Clan Rats going into the back of the Graveguard. That should help turn this fight. Gunner Runners moving up now, and they can smell blood, or lack thereof, and get some good shots into the Mortis Engine there, and start trying to whittle that down. Rat Ogres have taken a lot of damage here in the fight, but again, vampire counts are not amazing versus large units, so they've been able to do a lot more than they'd be able to do against maybe like the Empire, High Elves, any faction that can kind of whittle them down from range with their Lothern Sea Guard or with archers or whatever. Here the vampire counts have to close them down in melee, and very few of their units actually have a bonus versus large. These Rat Ogres definitely doing pretty well here, up to 80 kills. The Skeletons have mostly routed, and it's a pretty even fight over on this flank. Cairn Race and Stormvermin with Powers have been going at it for a long time here. I love seeing the Cairn Race. They're not a unit you see a whole lot. They're being used very effectively right now, up to 54 kills on elite infantry. It's very nice, and they're going to continue fighting for a very long time. 1 Invocation of the Heck to get them up to full if he has the mana to do so. Rat Ogres are probably going to go down here, and the Bonebreaker chasing after the Mortis Engine, trying really hard to kill that thing. Already down to 3,000 HP. This would be a great kill if they could get the center pace unit off the field. And those Banshees kind of floating around the flank of it. Rat Ogre doing its best to close it down and make that thing crumble. Gunner Runners are still doing what they can. One of them's actually shot most of its ammunition, only 16 kills, but a lot of its ammo did go into the Mortis Engine. Mannfred coming over to reinforce, and the left flank has been cleaned up by Clan Pestilens and the Skaven. We're going to start wading into the thick of the fighting here and just make those zombies a big bloodbath. Going to be gorgeous to watch, and yeah, it's fun to watch Rat Ogres in action. I've loved these things ever since Vermintide 1. That was when I got my first real look at them in action, and they're not disappointing in Total War Warhammer whatsoever. They're a great unit for 800 gold. They're going to have no problem beating up zombie summons, and we're going to be able to kill those pretty easily. But in the center, things are not going quite as well. Mortis Engine has taken a lot of damage. Achilles will want to be very careful with that, make sure it doesn't get committed to melee for a while. Thankfully, he does have regen for it. Stormvermin holding the line against the Graveguard for now. Up to 160 kills, but a lot of that were on zombies, of course. Graveguard up to 83, so it's been a pretty even fight on the main line. And now everything's coming in to reinforce. More of the Rat Ogres getting into the thick of it. Mortis Engine needs to get a little bit closer so the AoE debuff can start doing its work. Get the heals on all these zombies, all these Graveguard. It can be such a powerful centerpiece, but now with the Gunner Runners firing in as well, that HP is going to drop very quickly. It can be very accurate from close range on an unmoving target, of course. I would hope they'd be able to hit that. And yeah, down to 1900 health now. Warlord anchoring the flank. 16 leadership in an AoE. Very nice there. And we've got some more Stormvermin moving up with the sword and board. Almost up to 200 kills at this point. Mannfred doing what he can. He's got more cash. He's got more zombies on the way. On top of that health seed, he has the mobility. But he can't take on the Bonebreaker 1v1. That's the biggest issue for him right now. If he can get leadership off the field for the Skaven, that could definitely shift things, but it's going to be hard. He has only 2,700 health, though. Mortis Engine being obnoxiously loud, as this thing is wont to do, and absolutely gutting my Bonebreaker right now. You see the lances of it going all the way through its body, but 1,000 HP, one more volley from the Gunner Runners, and one more attack from the Warlord could be enough to finish it off. Verminous Valor, going to give him some extra speed boost to chase him down. And yeah, 500 health. Let's see the main line infantry. A lot of routing for the Clan Rats and the Storms. But finally, Mortis Engine goes down here. And this is going to be a big swing in the Skaven's favor. For sure. Mannfred doesn't want to stick around. The Warlord up to 90 kills at this point. We're just going to watch this thing in action for right now. Mannfred comes in to reinforce. He is backed up by the Graveguard. They could do some work here against it. Again, only 70 armor. It's not particularly impressive for a Lord. At the same time, he only costs 1,600 gold. So he did allow me to afford a lot more stuff than typically be able to if you go for some of the more expensive lords. But that is kind of Skaven in general. They don't have incredibly expensive lords here. And with the Plague Priest in the center of it all, Stormvermin surrounding the zombies, we are going to be able to overwhelm the main line, and we should be able to finish up this battle here as Mannfred makes his last stand against Big Daddy Bonebreaker, Roger the Rat Ogre. Couple more punches from those Warpstone fists, and it should be enough. Mannfred will crumble. Get a good look at the rainbows and waterfalls in the background, and that will be your game. Good night, sweet Mannfred. No one will miss you. So, Vampires versus Skaven. Interesting matchup. I think a lot of people who play Vampire accounts swear by the Terrorgeist build against them because you have the mobility to imbue that Terror on the line wherever you need to. But I don't think either of us really went for incredibly meta builds, but you can see the logic behind our builds, right? For like Agony Achilles and for the Vampire accounts, everything he had on the field here had a purpose. I honestly think that the Mortis engine is a risky pick, but it can pay off huge dividends when you consider all the utility it brings to the field, with the heals, with the HP degen aura for enemies that are nearby, with the Terror, and the fact that it just carves through infantry because it's basically a chariot. Yeah, it does a lot of damage, and it heals all your troops. So it's kind of hard to go wrong with it. You just need to make sure it stays alive for a long time, and it did there. I mean, it got 80 kills. I think it was used relatively well, but the Gutter Runners just finish it off in the end there alongside the Bonebreaker as the battle lines kind of broke down. There's no way to get away from something that moves that fast. We have the Graveguard. I mean, they all did well. Again, I think a couple of Graveguard with great weapons would have been really good on the main line, because if you're playing Vamp, you should expect Storms on the other side, because Plague Monks and Clan Rats just simply aren't going to do it for you if you're playing Skaven. So you should expect Storms. Plenty of meat shields to hold the line and kind of cause that fatigue for the Storms. But, I mean, look at the kills here. 185, 232, 215. A lot of work done for the sword and board there. And the halberds did work as well. This one only 65 because he was fighting the Karen race, who were used really well. I mean, 120 kills is really nice. That's a lot of work done there. I like that pick a lot. And the Rat Ogres, super nice as well. I mean, they're just a great... I mean, they're basically the Skaven cavalry, right? They're the Skaven equivalent. They have the mass to stop big targets from rampaging through your lines. They're basically used just in your back lines to make sure that whatever's trying to rear charge you, or whatever monster's overhead that lands in the middle of your army, can't get away. And they're exceptionally good for that, especially for their price. And again, I love using the Warlord with the Bonebreaker. It's one of the coolest mounts in the game. Not used that often, or at least I don't typically see it, but it's just fun. It's good. Maybe not the top tier pick. You'll usually see Skrulk or something else, but I really like the Bonebreaker a lot. And of course, you gotta bring summons if you're playing Skaven, because you want to swarm. The main infantry line here was not going to swarm. I needed extra numbers, especially against the Vamps, and so I brought a Plague Priest with a bunch of summons, and that worked out pretty well for me. Hope you guys enjoyed this game. I'll see you next time. Any Pride? Signing out for now.